It's easy to hear your favorite artist on WFPK from wherever you are. Listen on your smart speaker, live stream from our website at WFPK.org from Louisville Public Media.
Consequence Podcast Network.
Welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK, independent Louisville at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks to all of y'all who check in with all the episodes every single week. I know there are new ones every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I always appreciate you listening to the interviews and hit me up with comments or questions in the various places that you can do that, whether it's over at Apple Podcasts and iTunes, or for the folks who leave comments at YouTube. Of course, you can also download it Spotify. And if you're not a subscriber, please do take this moment to hit that subscribe button. Always appreciated, always helpful, especially if you're a big music nerd. You might as well follow along with everything that's going on here. I'm Kyle Meredith, and today I'll be talking with Soccer Mommy. Yes, the one and only Sophie Allison is back with an album called Color Theory. It is my absolute favorite album right now. I'm not exaggerating. I've been in love with what she's been doing with this set ever since Lucy arrived late last year. Just the tones and the feelings that are coming across here. And a lot of that is what we're going to be getting into. In fact, as the story goes, the album is divided into 3 sets, which she has divided into 3 colors. Blue representing depression and isolation, yellow for anxiety and illness, and gray for death and loss. It's a happy set, right? I'm going to ask about where that came from and how far into the process she noticed that something like this was taking shape. We'll hear a little bit about spending so much time on the road and how that possibly, if it fed in to the songs. And speaking of the songs, Circle the Drain, a fantastic single from the record, follows and even a sub-theme beyond the colors with water. Water is something that Sophie's talked about that she associates with sadness and loneliness, and that's something I definitely want to ask about as well. We'll also hear about why the 90s and early 2000s means so much to her and how that influences her music, having fun with production techniques and warping tapes. And we'll even hit on the song Feed, which was part of the Turning soundtrack that came out a little bit earlier this year. So let's hop into it. Talking about this fantastic record called Color Theory, it's Kyle Meredith with Soccer Mommy.
Hey, what's up?
My compliments are first because Color Theory has ended up being my favorite record that I have heard this year. It's such an amazing piece that you've done.
Thank you.
You're going to be up here in Forecastle Festival in the summer, so I know we'll see you then. And I thought it was interesting because you've sort of shouted out a few Louisville ties. You're also on tour with Tomberlin, which is a Louisville artist, and Rat Boys just put out a record. And
I forgot Rat Boys is from Louisville.
yeah, well, Julia is. She was actually my intern a few years ago, so that was cool. Yeah, I was like, look at that, it's Louisville all around for Soccer Mommy right now. I can appreciate that. But getting into this, so you know, as it's been told, the record it's really interesting. I mean, aside from it being just this great piece, it's also set up thematically where it's recorded. It's divided into thirds anyway. With the colors all representing something different. I was wondering if you could talk about that a little bit, and if that was thought out beforehand, or if that was something you sort of realized later as you were putting the record together.
It came about as I was writing the album. Like when I first started writing some of the songs, I had not come up with any idea like this. But as I was getting into the songs, I feel like I started to realize that they weren't all like just similar, I guess. Not that they, always have to be, but they felt very tonally different. Like, something like Lucy, or I guess that was the last one, so that's not really the one I was talking about, I guess. Something like Gray Light and Circle the Drain felt very tonally different, and I had no clue how that was going to fit in together, really. And the more I thought about it, the more I kind of felt like there were these different moods, and I started, as more songs were being written, they were all kind of fitting into these different moods, and it made me want to kind of separate them up into these feelings. And for me, whenever I, especially in music and writing, when I'm thinking about feelings and emotions and sounds that convey feelings. I always like connect imagery with it, and for me that often also has like kind of a a hue to it, not necessarily super colorful or something, but it just it feels a little bit more like summery or wintry or something, and has like a little bit of a hue. So that's kind of like where the color idea started to come in and match with it, and I kind of realized that as I kept writing, everything was kind of fitting into these color themes, and I just ran with it.
It's interesting. I know, a couple different things comes to mind because you hear about those people, and I know there's a scientific word for it, where they say they see sound in colors and
Yeah,
shapes.
it's synesthesia, I think.
Yeah.
I know that because I've been asked a lot if I have synesthesia, which I do not.
But I
I
see
do
where
not
you're
have it.
coming from, because for me, an album cover becomes more important than I ever realized, like every single time, because once the artist associates a color with that, it's sort of also how I hear the sound. Like all of my favorite records, when I think about them, I think of the color that the album cover ends up being.
Yeah, totally. No, I think that's something that's always mattered to me a lot too, making an album cover, is getting the colors right. Like for Clean, I was like, I feel like it needs to have like yellow and kind of like red undertones and have this, autumny, summery feel to it, which I feel like we were able to manage. But yeah, it was like some, other times it's been totally different. Like For Young Hearts, the first thing I put out was like a little darker, and it was green actually. Like it was just kind of like a more nighttime, like dark feeling to it.
It's great, the association that kind of comes along with that. So much of a deeper relationship, I think, with the music.
Hmm.
You've also talked about how a lot of this, or a certain part of this anyway, record was written on the road, which makes sense since you were on it for so long on the past record. And I think of the road, as I know this business, as a very lonely place. And considering, loneliness and sadness do play a part in a lot of these songs, was that one of the reasons? Was that part of? Do you think that had that effect on it?
No, I don't think so. Because I think that anywhere is lonely if you make it. I don't know, like like on the road, like I was around like my four people, like four good friends every second. I was literally never alone. But I can, you can make it. It can feel really lonely if you are, hiding in yourself. But at the same time, you can do that at home too. You can just never see anyone, literally, if you decide to. So I don't think the road is really a lonely place if you're with people that you know and are close to.
Well, I'll bridge that into, I think, one of the quotes, and it was probably the Pitchfork interview too, because, so the single Circle the Drain has that water relationship, and you said water has been something that I've always connected with sadness and loneliness, and I'm kind of pulling around to that theme. But if that's the case, why is that?
There's something about if you sit and look at the water, it's so silent and vast and just seems like empty. Like you could just go out there and like never be found. Like it's just kind of, there's just something about it that feels so deep and distant and separate, especially at night.
Right.
Specifically, like looking at the ocean at night or something. It's just so, you could someone could be out there in the middle of the water and no one would see it or know or anything, and you could just get lost out there alone. I don't know. Like you couldn't really do that in like New York.
Yeah.
You can do it in the city. You couldn't do it even in a field. Like it's not the same like depth, and like it can pull you out like further. It's like dangerous, and the depths of it and the vastness is kind of terrifying. I'm afraid of the ocean. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. If you can't tell by all the words I'm using, I am terrified of being in the ocean, in the water. And also, the reason I'm mostly scared of it is we have no idea what's down there.
Right.
But that's a separate issue. It's a separate thing. It also it just makes you feel very lonely, and it also has like a sedating feeling to it. I don't know, at least for me. Like, sure, I just get very calm and quiet, and yeah, I don't know. It's lonely, but it's also very like calm and sedate. And I feel like that's kind of what sadness is like. At least what I was trying in depression, like at least what I was trying to depict in the first part of the record, is it is lonely and it is sad, but it's also like sedating and it's calm. It's not like anxiety. It's like kind of the opposite. It's like very low energy, and I feel like you could just like go out there and like die there and you just not even know you were dying. You know, like I feel like it would be like in cold water or something. I feel like, I don't know. It just seems it's very sedating and calming, but also lonely and sad.
I do want to ask with that song. It might be complete coincidence, but is there any relationship to the 90s song by Feeder, the song High, the similarities there?
I would say it's complete coincidence because I could not tell you what that song sounded like. But, like, I mean, especially if it's the intro. I feel like there's there's so much, like, 90s and early 2000s stuff that starts in that way.
Yeah.
So it's, it's common. It's not, I'm sure it is very similar.
But I thought there was a chance because, and I don't want to go down one of those roads that gets taken down a long time ago, but there does seem to be kind of a 90s pull off of a lot of this. Although I've heard you talk about the early 2000s production being kind of an inspiration too. Does that stuff come naturally, or is that an era that you sort of seek out for any reason?
Well, I think like the very late 90s and early 2000s was like the first music I ever heard in my life and loved.
So that's your sweet spot right there.
And that was the kind of stuff that was on pop rock radio when I was like 3. And that's when I fell in love with music. Like I started writing when I was 5. So it was something that it's just always really connected with me because it just makes me feel like a kid again. And it makes me feel excited about music, and it reminds me of being young. So there definitely is, like, I am definitely very drawn to that. And it's a big connection there, and I feel like it is an inspiration on a lot of the production on my music because I just can't help but, like, love how that sounds more than a lot of other stuff. And I think that's when I kind of, like, got my voice, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I got it with that, like, sound in mind. So I think it's something that I've always been drawn to. And then, even more, like, earlier 90s stuff I got into when I was in high school and fell in love with when I was like kind of a different person. So I think that it's just always been something that I've been very attracted to and very in love with the sound of.
Well, it's definitely something I relate to, especially when I hear it, one of those things that draws me in. And I like how you use some of the culture from that as well. Like I'll even, the tape at the end of Gray Lights sort of reminded me of also when you did something similar with tape at the end of Cool from the last record. And like, was that a callback at all?
I mean, not as much as a callback as, like, I like doing weird tape stuff in songs. I like warping things, and I feel like I'm going to do that a lot in the future. I try to always, not do it the exact same way, but yeah, it's always something cool. Because at the end of Gray Light, there's a tape machine click coming in, but the actual, like, weird sound at the end is not a tape warp. It is a factory machine sounds, like accelerating, basically. So, it's like different kind of stuff, but it has that same effect of like warping and making something weirdly like mechanical rather than sonic, I guess. I don't know, like it's like a little bit less analog, like because you're kind of tricked into music when you're listening to like a recording into feeling like it's a band playing or something. And I think sometimes it's cool to like kind of turn that on its head a little bit.
I wanted to quickly compliment you, too, because outside of the record, you released the song Feed, which was on the Turning soundtrack, and I have such a love for soundtrack cuts and how they kind of do what we were talking about with colors and all of that stuff. Was that part of the sessions, or was that, like, directed specifically toward the film?
That was I wrote that as, like for the film. Like, they asked me for a song, and I said, okay, I can make something, and I made that.
That's a cool one. I really do love it, and kind of nice little extra bit there, anyway.
Thank you.
Sophie, I really do. Color Theory is like my favorite record right now. I can't thank you enough for doing the music here. And thanks so much for taking a few minutes to talk about it.
Thank you.
All right. It's a pleasure. We'll see you around.
Yeah, see ya.
My thanks, Sophie Allison. Soccer Mommy, the brand new album, is called Color Theory, and I cannot recommend it enough. Now, the last time she and I talked was in 2018 behind her debut LP called Clean, which was a record that arrived after a few years of stockpiling songs that she would eventually post on Bandcamp, which quickly pulled in tons of new fans and critics alike, myself included. In this interview, we got to talk about those tracks on Clean and relating its personal stories to listeners, especially to people that she may never have met, as well as getting to open for Liz Phair, one of the mini tours that she's done in the past few years. So I'll give you a part 2 here. Kyle Meredith with Soccer Mommy.
Yeah, of course.
You've got the new record Clean. I mean, I see everywhere that it's calling it your debut, which is only a little confusing because there are 2 other releases before that. How do you look at it all?
I definitely think of it as my debut. There are actually way more than that. on Bandcamp. But yeah, I did have kind of 2 more official type records, but all of them so far have been like compilations almost. I haven't like sat down and written a full-length album. Like Collection was mostly songs off Bandcamp that just kind of were put together. And For Young Hearts was actually originally an EP that I ended up adding to. So yeah, it's all just, at this point, it's just kind of been like songs kind of thrown together into some, like a release rather than a full written album.
But it must be nice having sort of that collection behind you, really going into the first record. I know a lot of artists, I don't know if you ever had plans to do this, but you know, some artists who would have that kind of that vault, you can take those later on and update those and repurpose them, you know, for an official release or something. Are there any of those songs that you could see yourself doing that in the future that you would want to?
I don't know. I feel like for now I want to try to just write new stuff, but if a song ever fit, I wouldn't have a problem with like redoing some of the old songs on my Bandcamp, because I was already pretty choosy with songs that I like worked on and uploaded. So the stuff that's up is all stuff that I like. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not against it.
I mean, either way you cut it, though, 3 releases in 3 years is impressive. And I mean, do you constantly write? Is this a great work ethic, or is it just the luck of having lots of songs, you know, lying around to compile, as you say?
I constantly write, really. Like when I was in college, I would release there were times when I released you know, 2 EPs in the span of like a month, just because I'm always writing stuff. But I think, you know, it's definitely draining to write that much. And I think if I take longer, I can be even more choosy about which songs make it onto an album. But I mean, you never really know how long it's going to take you to find 10 or 12 songs that you love.
Especially, you know, you're sort of known for that diary-esque writing. You know, I see that in all the reviews. They'll use that word and everything to mine your life so much, as you're saying, to write like that constantly. Does it ever become a challenge to figure out like, oh, I've got to figure out I've already written it like that. You know, it's got to be a different direction this time.
I don't think so. So far, it seems like every time I've finished something, I've had a direction naturally come to me for the next one. Like, I think it just kind of follows my life pretty well. So even if I'm writing, you know, even if I keep writing about love songs or about, like, the same kind of stuff that I'm known for, it's just like, I don't know, if it's a good song, it's a good song. I'm less worried about having a new take or a new direction and more just, like, writing good songs.
Well, if it's about your life as you go along, does this record carry a story? Is there a thread that kind of ties it all together?
I think it's just about like feeling like you want to be something better than yourself, and trying to make that reality, and kind of realizing that you're not, that by making yourself, you know, less emotional or less vulnerable, it's not actually bettering yourself, and it's not actually changing who you are, and you can't really run from yourself in the end.
Now, does that line of thinking go into any, like when you, instead of going under your name, you know, as an artist, Sophie Allison, to choosing sort of a moniker instead?
No, not, I mean, I guess maybe for some people it could, but for me, when I chose a moniker, it was kind of a joke because I was just making stuff on Bandcamp for absolutely no one. And it was more of like a joke on my Twitter. So, yeah, I didn't really put any thought into it, actually. It just kind of was something that stuck.
But it allows you, I mean, it allows you to be lost in a character if you need to, doesn't it?
Definitely, yeah. I think it allows you also to just separate yourself from people listening a little bit and just, you know, say whatever you want to say.
Because I know, yes, I mean, singing in such a personal way as you do, it does sort of invite a kind of knowing from fans. At least they think that they know you,
yeah.
You know, good or bad or weird anyway. Have you had to experience any of that yet?
Oh, definitely, for sure. Just like it can be very strange to have people think that they know you when they don't actually know you at all.
And to think these are the early days, that could only I don't want to scare you away.
I know, definitely. I've thought that many times. When
you're writing, do you ever, because of that, has it made you sort of hold back and like, you know what, I can't put that line in there? No, because I know it'll happen.
No, it never has, actually, because I've always just felt very much like, well, my stuff is, like, direct. It's also not so direct that, like, someone's going to text me and be like, this is about me. You know, I think that it's always, I throw pieces of experiences with different people into stuff. So it's not like I have to worry about a song directly, like, screaming one person's name or something.
Well, there's some musical great moments all over the record, too. I sort of latch on to the end of the song Cool, When it feels like everything just goes wrong. What was how did you guys do that? What did you do that?
It was just like a time warp at the end of the track. We had everything recorded and just put a warp on it. So I threw it off kilter.
I mean, it's almost a musical metaphor right there. That's what I kept thinking.
Yeah.
I know we're all still getting familiar with you, though. You know, the backstory part of the interview. Where does this all come from? When did you start writing songs that you would actually play out? I know I read something like you wrote a song at 5, but when did it really turn serious for you?
I don't know. I think that when it really turned to be like something that was seriously helping me like feel or like express my emotions and something that people were taking an interest to is probably right before I went to college.
Yeah, what pushed you at that point to do it?
I don't know. I just wanted to learn more about recording and stuff like that, and I just started recording my own stuff and putting it out.
Was playing it in front of people much of a leap for you?
I don't think it. No, I had been playing music in front of people for my whole life, so it wasn't that weird at all.
Was there a first, what would I say? Is there a first, like, holy shit moment? Like, this is actually working?
Maybe when I got, like, a record deal, like, when I got approached by a label for the first time, I think that was kind of like, oh, shit, like, this could be something that actually gets spread to people. And then, like, yeah, I don't know, like, recording this album was definitely, like, very exciting and felt like a serious jump.
There was a tweet you put out there that my mom is playing my entire album over the speakers in our house. Have they always been supportive of you in this?
Yes, they always have, ever since I was a little kid.
Now, and again, I'll go back to your style of songwriting. Has there ever been any of those weird, awkward, or cringeworthy moments where you're like, do I want them to hear this?
We're just not, I'm not going to talk about it with my parents. I don't really have to stress about it. I know they'll be hearing anything I say, but I'm also just kind of like, they're not going to approach me about anything if they think something's weird. So it's fine.
I don't want to make this more of a thing than it is, but it does seem like there is an underground movement happening. You know, there are artists that are doing similar thing with you. That, you know, similar type of writing. A lot of them happen to be women artists. Do you feel part of a scene right now?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I feel like part of a scene, but I definitely feel like I have like friends who are doing similar stuff and who support me and who I support. But I don't know if it's not as big of a thing to be a scene. I think there is like a underground music scene, obviously, but I don't know if I feel like super part of a community or something.
It's usually one of the things that people get grouped into long after it's over anyway, but
yeah,
it
definitely.
just seems like something's in the air and something's happening. I mean, I feel like it's an important time in music because I feel like we're in a transitional period and artists like you are leading the way, in this. It's what makes it really exciting. And by the way, your forebears artistically, you're going to be opening up for Liz Phair, right?
Yes, I am. Pretty astounding.
Yeah, holy cow, Liz Phair. Is that something like you were pushing for? Was that a surprise? Did you get a call one day?
It was a total surprise.
How does that call happen?
Surprise. I didn't even know. I didn't know she was doing a tour. I didn't know that I was submitted to open for it. I don't think that my agent even reached out for it because I don't think any of us really knew there was a tour happening. I just got a text from my manager saying, check your email. I'm sending over a really amazing offer. And it was like their agent inquiring about us opening on the tour.
Have you been able to talk to her yet? Is that happened?
No. I mean, she tweeted at me, but I haven't gotten to speak to her at all. I'm sure I will on the tour though.
Well, I'm very envious and sort of doing a vicarious thing through you on this part.
Yeah.
Such a big fan of all of her music. I can understand how exciting that would be. I'll be looking to catch one of those shows, so hopefully see you out there.
Yeah. So, yeah, totally. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you again. Love Clean. Congratulations, and thanks for giving the call today.
Yeah, thanks. Great talking to you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
2018 interview with Sophie Allison there behind the Soccer Mommy LP called Clean. Again, thanks to Sophie for the new conversation, the record Color Theory. Check it out, check it out, check it out. Thanks to Sophie for the conversation. Thanks to you for listening to the episode as well. Before you get out of here, if you're not a subscriber, I do hope you take that moment to follow along, subscribe to this podcast, keep up with all the interviews, all your favorite artists, or tons that you don't know. Let me introduce you to some. There are new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and we'll deliver them straight to your preferred listening device by hitting subscribe. That's what you got to do. You got to hit subscribe at wherever you're listening to this now. You can get it at iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, Podchaser, NPR.org. Again, wherever you get your podcasts. And after that, after you subscribe, head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. It is an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, and bonus interviews as well. Again, that's WFPK.org. Consequence of Sound has your music and film news. You can find me on just about any social media platform at Kyle Meredith. Hope you follow along there as well. And that does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.
Consequence Podcast Network.
I'm Leo Phillips, host of This Must Be the Gig. We're a weekly podcast that documents everything about the world of live music, speaking with choreographers, costume and set designers, the people who run beloved venues and festivals, and, of course, speaking with musicians about that one gig that changed their lives. Get your peek behind the curtain at consequenceofsound.net, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.